A battery of VX gas rockets is presently deployed to deliver a highly lethal strike on the population of the San Francisco Bay Area.
You go talk to him.
Me?
Yeah.
The power of this chemical is way beyond anything you can imagine.
The Rock stands as a defining action thriller of the mid-1990s, a film that blends military intensity, political grievance, and explosive spectacle into a tightly wound narrative that never loosens its grip. From its opening moments, the movie establishes a tone of urgency and moral tension, grounding its larger-than-life action in the very real consequences of secrecy, betrayal, and loyalty. It opens with a sense of solemnity rather than noise, showing a decorated Marine general, Francis X. Hummel, visiting the grave of his wife. This quiet, reflective scene immediately reframes what might otherwise be a standard villain introduction. Hummel is not driven by chaos or greed alone. He is motivated by a long, simmering anger over how his country has treated the families of soldiers who died on covert missions, men whose sacrifices were erased by classified paperwork and political convenience. That emotional foundation becomes the backbone of the entire story, giving weight to every threat that follows. Hummel's plan is as audacious as it is terrifying. Using his authority, experience, and reputation, he commandeers a group of elite Marines who believe they are following orders for a legitimate mission. Together, they steal a cache of VX nerve gas rockets, one of the deadliest chemical weapons ever devised, capable of killing thousands in minutes. Their target is Alcatraz Island, the infamous former prison sitting in San Francisco Bay, isolated yet perfectly positioned to threaten one of America's most iconic cities. By occupying the island and aiming the rockets at San Francisco, Hummel forces the U.S. government into an impossible corner. His demand is not personal enrichment, but restitution, $100 million to be distributed among the families of fallen servicemen who were denied recognition and compensation. If the government refuses or attempts to retake the island, he threatens to launch the chemical weapons and unleash mass civilian casualties. As the crisis unfolds, the film cuts to the other side of the equation, introducing Stanley Goodspeed, an FBI chemical weapons specialist whose brilliance in the lab is offset by his awkwardness in the field. Stanley is intelligent, principled, and deeply uncomfortable with violence, which immediately sets him apart from the hardened military figures surrounding him. He is the kind of man who understands the science behind destruction but recoils from its use, making him an unlikely candidate for a mission that will soon require nerves of steel. His personal life, particularly his relationship with his girlfriend Carla, adds another layer of vulnerability, reminding the audience that Stanley has something to lose beyond professional pride. The government's response to the Alcatraz takeover is swift and decisive, at least on the surface. A team of Navy SEALs is assembled to infiltrate the island through its underwater tunnels and neutralize the threat before Hummel can act. Stanley is attached to the mission as a technical expert, tasked with disarming the VX rockets once the SEALs secure the launch sites. Yet, even before the operation begins, it becomes clear that this is not a simple military strike. Alcatraz is a fortress of narrow corridors, blind corners, and layered defenses, and Hummel's men are not mercenaries, but highly trained soldiers who believe they are fighting for a just cause. Recognizing that Alcatraz holds secrets beyond maps and schematics, the government turns to a man who knows the prison better than anyone alive, John Patrick Mason, a former British intelligence operative who escaped from Alcatraz decades earlier and since has been held without trial in a classified federal prison. Mason is a relic of Cold War espionage, sharp-witted, world-weary, and defiant despite years of incarceration. His history with American intelligence is steeped in betrayal, and his bitterness is matched by only his refusal to be broken. When offered a chance at freedom in exchange for his help, Mason agrees, not out of patriotism, but because it presents an opportunity to settle old scores and reclaim his dignity. The dynamic between Mason and Stanley becomes one of the film's greatest strengths. They are opposites in nearly every way. Mason is experienced, cynical, and instinctively violent when necessary, while Stanley is cautious, idealistic, and governed by rules and protocols. Their partnership begins with mistrust and frustration, yet it gradually evolves into mutual respect as each recognizes the other's value. Mason pushes Stanley beyond his comfort zone, forcing him to act decisively under pressure, while Stanley challenges Mason's fatalism, reminding him that not every mission has to end in bloodshed. The infiltration of Alcatraz is staged with relentless tension. The SEAL team's underwater approach is methodical and quiet, building suspense through anticipation rather than noise. When they surface inside the prison's utility tunnels, the atmosphere shifts from controlled precision to mounting dread. Hummel's men are already aware of potential entry points, and the moment the SEALs step into the open, the operation collapses in a brutal ambush. In a matter of seconds, elite soldiers are wiped out by automated gunfire, leaving Stanley and Mason as the sole survivors. This sudden reversal is shocking, not just for its violence, but for what it represents. The illusion of an easy solution is destroyed, and the fate of an entire city now rests on two men who were never meant to fight this battle alone. Trapped inside Alcatraz with no backup and limited communication, Stanley and Mason are forced to improvise. They move through the prison's decaying cell blocks and maintenance shafts, evading patrols and disarming traps, all while the clock ticks closer to Hummel's deadline. Each encounter underscores the complexity of the situation. The Marines they face are not faceless villains. They are disciplined soldiers who believe their cause is righteous. This moral ambiguity reaches its peak in moments where hesitation could mean death, and decisions must be made in seconds with irreversible consequences. Meanwhile, General Hummel himself becomes an increasingly tragic figure. As pressure mounts, it becomes clear that he never truly intended to launch the VX rockets. His plan relies on the assumption that the government will concede rather than risk mass casualties, but cracks begin to show as his own men question his resolve. A faction within his ranks, led by more ruthless officers, grows impatient and begins to see the chemical weapons not as leverage, but as tools to be used. This internal conflict transforms the standoff from a single moral dilemma into a multi-layered crisis, where the greatest threat may come from those who have lost sight of the original cause. Stanley's role becomes pivotal when he is forced to confront the VX rockets directly. The film does not shy away from the horrifying reality of chemical weapons, depicting their effects with chilling clarity. In one of the most intense sequences, Stanley must neutralize a VX missile after it is accidentally breached, exposing him to lethal nerve gas. His frantic struggle to counteract the poison using a heart-stopping injection is a visceral reminder that intelligence and courage are sometimes indistinguishable under fire. This moment cements Stanley's transformation from a reluctant participant into a man willing to risk everything to save others. Mason, on the other hand, faces his own reckoning as he navigates the prison that once held him captive. Alcatraz is more than a battlefield for him. It is a symbol of betrayal and lost years. His knowledge of hidden routes and escape paths becomes crucial, but so does his emotional connection to the place. As he moves through familiar corridors, the past and present collide, and the mission becomes personal in ways the government never anticipated. The confrontation between Hummel and his own men ultimately reveals the true heart of the story. When Hummel realizes that his subordinates are prepared to launch the rockets regardless of civilian casualties, he attempts to stop them, even at the cost of his life. His death is not framed as a victory, but as a tragedy, underscoring the film's central question about the price of duty and the consequences of institutional neglect. Hummel's original grievance remains unresolved by his death, casting a shadow over the supposed triumph of averting disaster. The final act escalates into a race against time as rogue Marines attempt to fire the remaining rockets. Stanley and Mason split up, each confronting danger in his own way. Stanley relies on his technical expertise and sheer determination, while Mason embraces his instincts and experience, confronting enemies head-on. Their parallel efforts converge in a climax that blends explosive action with personal stakes, culminating in the neutralization of the final threat just moments before catastrophe. In the aftermath, the film allows for brief moments of reflection. The city is saved, the immediate danger past, but the underlying issues that sparked the crisis linger. Stanley returns to his life changed, no longer the man who hesitated at the edge of danger, while Mason finally slips away into freedom, his fate left deliberately ambiguous. This ending reinforces the film's refusal to offer simple answers. Victory comes at a cost, and justice, while momentarily served, remains incomplete. The Rock endures not just because of its action sequences, but because it frames those sequences within a story that respects its characters and their motivations. It balances spectacle with substance, asking viewers to consider the human cost of secrecy and the moral gray areas of national security. By anchoring its explosions and chases in genuine emotional conflict, the film elevates itself beyond formula, delivering a cinematic experience that remains compelling long after the final scene fades.